Welcome to the Word for 2022. Today we're in 2 Kings chapter 5. In this chapter, we have another amazing miracle account. Naaman is a foreigner, and he is the commander of the army in Aram. That means that he's actually an enemy of Israel. But he has leprosy, which is an incurable disease. There's a raiding party that goes into Israel, and this raiding party from Aram, they capture a young Israelite girl. She becomes the servant to Naaman's wife. Now, while she is there in service to the house of Naaman, she tells his wife, "If only my master would see the servant who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." She was talking about Elisha. Now, Elisha had never cured anyone from leprosy before, but she had faith in God that God would do it through him. Faith and hope was instilled in Naaman. He goes to the king of Aram, and the king says, "By all means, go." Then the king of Aram sends a letter to the king of Israel, and he says, "I am sending my servant to you so you might heal him." When the king of Israel reads this note, he's flabbergasted. He says, "What? Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? No one can do this but God." Then he tears his robes. When Elisha hears what the king had done, he then sends a message to the king of Israel, "Send him to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel." Elisha was going to point this man to God. Well, Naaman, he goes, and Elisha, he sends out his servant Gehazi to meet with him. And Gehazi then says, "Go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and you will be healed." Naaman becomes angry. He says, "I thought that he would surely come out to me, stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot, and cure my leprosy, not go wash 7 times in some dirty river in Israel." Well, he had his own idea of how healing would happen. We too can have our own concept of how things should happen. And we too can become angry when our preconceived notions don't happen as we first thought. Naaman's servant, however, urges him to simply obey. Naaman, he agrees, he humbles himself, and he is obedient. He dips himself 7 times in the Jordan River, and on the 7th time, he is healed. Now, what do you think would have happened if he only dipped himself 5 or 6 times, if he didn't fully obey? Probably no healing and no miracle. But upon the 7th time of being obedient, he was cleansed. And not only was he cleansed physically, but spiritually he was changed as well. We read in verse 15 that he goes back to thank Elisha, and he says, "Now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel." He even says to Elisha, "Now I'm going back home, and when I do, and I'm with the king, and the king goes into the temple of Rimmon, I will be going with him because he will be on my arm. And when he bows down, I will go down too, but I will not be bowing in worship." Naaman was telling Elisha, "My heart belongs to the Lord. My duty, it does not reflect my devotion. My worship belongs to God and God alone. I will be going back home, but I want to be a witness for the one true God, the God of Israel, the God of heaven and earth." This is an amazing miracle account, and it reminds us that when we too have a problem, God wants us to come to him, and he wants us to obey him. He wants us to obey him even when it doesn't make sense, when we fully don't understand everything that's going to take place. Still obey him. And God wants us to thank him as he does answer. And finally, he wants us to live differently so that others can see the difference that God has made in our life. Thank you for joining the Word for 2022.